The canyon still carried the echo of gunfire long after silence returned. Dust floated like smoke across the dying light, settling on the faces of the fallen. James Holloway, a rancher from the borderlands, lowered his rifle and surveyed the battlefield below. He hadn't meant to get involved, but when he heard the gunshots, he couldn't ride away. Honor to him wasn't about race or tribe. It was about doing what a man should when evil showed its face. The Apache warriors below had fought bravely, though they were few. Now, as the sun bled across the horizon, he guided his horse down the rocky slope, his coat torn, his heart heavy. The desert, vast and indifferent, had just witnessed a small act of humanity, one that would change his life forever. The survivors gathered around their wounded elder, an old man whose grey braids spoke of many winters. James approached slowly, unsure how he'd be received. The warriors watched with tense, guarded eyes, hands still on their weapons. Then, as James dismounted, the elder raised a trembling hand. "Why, help us, white man," he rasped. The rancher's jaw tightened. "Because right is right," he said simply. The elder studied him for a long moment before nodding once, a gesture that carried both gratitude and ancient dignity. Around them, the cries of the wounded blended with the whisper of the wind. In that fragile silence, two worlds, one bound by the soil, the other by the saddle, briefly understood each other. As the night deepened, the Apache camp transformed. Fires were lit, songs were sung, and the living honored the dead. James sat apart, sharpening his knife beside the fire, feeling both out of place and strangely at peace. The elders' people brought him food and water. No one spoke English, yet their gestures spoke louder than words. Children watched him from behind tents, whispering about the foreign man who fought like a storm. The desert sky shimmered with stars, endless, untamed, and mercilessly beautiful. James looked at it and wondered if he'd done the right thing. Saving lives felt easy compared to what came next, facing the quiet when the gunfire was gone. He knew he could leave at dawn, ride back to his lonely ranch, and forget this night. But part of him knew something here had already changed him. Later, when the celebration grew quiet, the elder approached him. He carried himself with the solemn grace of a man who had seen both war and wisdom. Standing before James, he said in broken English, "You saved my tribe. You saved my blood." The camp grew still. Everyone turned to listen. "In our law," the elder continued, his voice deep as the earth itself, "a debt of life must be repaid with life." James frowned, uncertain. "You owe me nothing," he replied. But the elder only shook his head and called out to someone in the crowd. A young woman stepped forward, her steps light, her chin high. The flickering firelight danced over her bronze skin, her long dark hair, her steady gaze that met his without fear. The elder's voice carried through the camp. "I give you my daughter," he declared, "as your wife." The murmurs began immediately, some proud, some shocked. James felt the blood drain from his face. Marriage. This wasn't what he had come for. He opened his mouth to protest, but no words came. The young woman, Kaya, looked at him with calm defiance, as though she too was testing him. She didn't bow her head. She didn't plead. Her eyes said, "If you refuse, do it with honor." The fire popped between them, a spark jumping into the air, like the start of something dangerous. James finally spoke, his voice rough. "I can't accept a person as payment," he said. "That's not my way." The elder stepped closer, his expression unreadable. "Then you shame my people," he warned. "A gift refused is a bond broken." The words hit hard. James looked at Kaya again, then at the faces surrounding them, faces that had nearly been lost hours ago. He felt the weight of their gratitude and their pride. To them, this wasn't about ownership. It was about trust, about binding two lives in honor. Slowly, he lowered his head. "I don't understand your ways," he admitted quietly, "but I'll respect them." The elder placed a weathered hand on his shoulder and nodded. Around them, the tribe began to sing a low, ancient melody that rose into the night air like a prayer. When the ceremony ended, the fire burned low, and the stars stretched cold and wide across the sky. James sat beside the flames, unable to sleep. Gaia sat across from him, her hands resting on her knees, eyes glimmering with unspoken thoughts. She hadn't said a word since being offered to him, and he hadn't dared to speak first. There was no touch between them, only distance, a quiet filled with questions neither could voice. The desert wind whistled softly through the canyon, carrying with it the scent of smoke and sage. For the first time in his life, James felt something he didn't know how to name, a strange mix of guilt, curiosity, and awe. When dawn finally came, the camp stirred to life. Warriors packed their gear, children chased one another through the dust, and women prepared the morning fires. Kaya rose silently and walked past James, her shadow stretching long across the sand. She didn't look back. He watched her go, feeling the pull of something beyond understanding. Maybe it wasn't fate. Maybe it was something simpler. The realization that, in a land ruled by pride and survival, even a hardened cowboy could find his heart tested not by bullets, but by honor itself. The morning sun rose over the red cliffs, washing the desert in gold. The Apache camp stirred slowly, fires rekindled, horses tethered, voices soft with the rhythm of dawn. James Holloway stood apart from it all, his hat in his hands, his thoughts heavy. He had fought wars, faced outlaws, and buried brothers, but nothing had ever left him as conflicted as this. The debt of honor weighed on him like the desert heat. He had never believed in taking what wasn't freely given, yet here he was, a stranger in a world that followed laws older than his own. The faint crackle of the fire behind him was broken by the quiet sound of footsteps. When he turned, Kaya was there. She stood tall, her dark hair glinting in the sunlight, her face calm and unreadable. There was no trace of fear, no hint of embarrassment, only strength. "My father's word is law," she said, her voice steady but soft. "But if you do not wish this, I will tell him." The words hung in the still air, fragile but brave. James studied her face. He saw the dignity in her posture, the calm fire in her eyes, and the way she met him not as property, but as equal. The desert wind tugged gently at her hair, and for a long moment neither spoke. Finally, James drew a slow breath. "You deserve choice," he said quietly. "No one owns you, not even in the name of honor." Kaya's lips curved faintly, not quite a smile, but something close. "Then let the choice be mine," she whispered. There was power in her voice, the kind that came not from command, but conviction. She stepped closer, her gaze unwavering. "I choose you, not because of debt," she said, her words carrying the weight of truth, "but because you saw me as free." James felt something shift in him then, a breaking of the invisible wall that had stood between their worlds. He wasn't sure if what he felt was love, but it was something pure, something real. The tribe watched from a distance, their faces lit by the morning light. Whispers rippled through the camp, some curious, some approving. The elder stood near the largest fire, his weathered face unreadable. He saw the way Kaya looked at James, and the way the cowboy stood not in dominance, but respect. The old man nodded once to himself. He had seen enough to know this was no insult to his people. This was fate answering in its own strange way. When Kaya turned to her father, he simply said, "Then let it be so." No ceremony, no grand speech, just words heavy as the desert stones. The day passed slowly after that. James helped repair a broken corral fence, working beside the Apache men who had once eyed him with suspicion. Now they worked in silence, but it was no longer the silence of mistrust. It was understanding. Kaya carried water from the stream, her laughter joining the sounds of the camp for the first time since the battle. As the sun climbed high, she stopped to hand James a cup. Their fingers brushed briefly, and neither pulled away. It was such a small thing, but in a world that had given them little kindness, it felt monumental. When the evening came, the desert sky turned crimson and gold. The camp prepared a feast not for a war won, but for a bond formed. The elder spoke to his people in his native tongue, his voice carrying through the cool wind. He spoke of honor, of debts, of the strange ways fate bound hearts across bloodlines. James couldn't understand the words, but he understood the tone. Gratitude, blessing, peace. Kaya stood beside him, her head held high. For the first time, he allowed himself to feel it, that he wasn't an outsider anymore. Somehow, this barren, beautiful land had claimed him, and he it. Later that night, when the stars returned in their endless glitter, Kaya and James sat on a rock overlooking the valley. The air was cool, the moon soft against the hills. She spoke of her childhood, of riding horses through the canyons, of songs her mother once sang. He told her of the ranch he had lost to bandits, of a life spent wandering between places that never felt like home. Their words came slow at first, then easily until silence fell again, not the awkward kind, but the kind that said more than words ever could. The desert wind wrapped around them like a living thing, carrying the warmth of the fires below and the wild scent of sage. "You could go," Kaya said quietly after a long while. Tomorrow. My father would not stop you." James smiled faintly. "Maybe I could," he replied, "but I don't want to." She turned toward him then, her eyes reflecting the moonlight. "Then you stay, not because of what was promised," she said softly, "but because you choose to." He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "I reckon that's the only way to do anything right," he said. Below them, the fires dimmed as the camp fell into sleep. The coyotes howled in the distance, their cries echoing off the canyon walls. The world felt vast and fragile all at once, a place where death had nearly taken them, and yet life had given something back in return. In that quiet moment, James realized he had come to the desert searching for nothing, but found everything he didn't know he needed. A purpose, a belonging, and a woman whose courage matched his own. When dawn came again, they stood side by side before the tribe. The elder placed his hands upon theirs, one weathered and strong, the other calloused from years of labor. "The spirits see truth," he said solemnly. "What is chosen freely will endure." The people bowed their heads in respect. There was no ring, no priest, no paper, only the open desert as witness. And that was enough. As the sun climbed higher, James looked out across the endless sands and felt the world stretch wide before him. Kaya slipped her hand into his, and together they faced the horizon, not as strangers bound by an old promise, but as two souls who had rewritten it. In the land where survival was the only law, they had found something rarer than life itself. Love, born of freedom, tested by fire and bound not by blood but by choice.